Hey everyone, this is Ashley Latecki Ellenboss with Skyhouse Herb School and Apothecary. And today I'll be sharing some tips and my checklist for self-care for mothers. This topic is so important because I think so many mothers and mothers-to-be are overwhelmed. And I've been seeing clients for over 13 years as a clinical herbalist registered with the American Herbalist Guild. I'm also a mother of two small girls, ages 3 and 5. So I have a lot of experience working on this. And so these are just my little checklist. So you can go through these. I've got 5 things on my checklist that I think are really, really important self-care tips for mothers. So let's dive in. The first one on my checklist is knowing your roles and your relationship functions. And this is something that I heard first from this wonderful family therapist. Her name is Danya Rico, and she is a practitioner of Bhakti Yoga. She's a mother, she's a family counselor. And so she talks about these 2 roles that we often find are either at odds or are unbalanced in our day-to-day lives as mothers. And that I like to think of them as like 2 buckets. So we kind of have our spousal bucket, so the relationship bucket between our partners and ourselves. And then we also have our parental bucket. So if we think of these 2 as, these different roles we play, and, for many of us, we first were couple, we were a couple first. We had a partner. And so there were all sorts of activities and certain dynamics and ways of feeding and filling yourself from that relationship. And then when children come along, it can be really hard to make that transition. A few things can happen. One thing that can happen is that we tend to start to put all of our attention into the parental bucket or into that particular role. And this is very normal. And I think it's actually a good thing in the beginning when a child is first born. It's super important that you take good care of your baby. I mean, they're little infants and they need you 100% of you 100% of the time. However, what happens is as that baby grows older, if we're not careful to make sure that we're also feeding and nourishing our relationship with our partner, then what can happen is a lot of our emotional needs, our physical needs, there's a lot of touch as a mother, all of those needs are getting met. And so, and we're also getting quite exhausted because we feel like we're alone in many ways in those early months and even that first year. So we can feel just exhausted, overwhelmed. I have nothing more to give. I'm touched out. I don't want any more physical touch. And then what can happen is that bucket, our partner and that bucket can start to drain and can get exhausted and depleted. And so what we want to be looking at, the first self-care tip is how much energy am I putting into my relationship bucket and how much energy am I putting into my parental bucket or my motherhood bucket? And if I look at those, are they even? And it doesn't have to be every day. They have to be, it's not like in a homeostasis where they have to be the same every day. There can be some give and take. Your children are sick, so more energy has to go here. Or, it's you and your spouse's anniversary, so more energy goes here. So there's this give and take. But without this, especially without making sure that our relationship is in a good place, then self-care becomes really hard because we are essentially on our own. We don't have the support of our partner. And this is something that is, I think, so important, is that we have to, really make sure that we're onboarding, right? The spousal or the couple energy into parenting so that you're a team. You and your partner are a team and you're putting energy into that friendship and into that relationship. So then that way you are working together as a unit parenting and you're not the solo parent doing all of that work, which as a mother, we think, well, we have to, that's biologically and, maybe, financially, you have to be the one that takes care of the child while your partner works. But, really, if you're not putting energy into that if you're not feeding your parental bucket with that steadiness from the relational bucket of you and your partner, both are going to start to drain. And then you're going to not have very much to work with. So that's my tip number one, is just look into that in your own life and in your own dynamics. And just, maybe you just need to shift some things around so that you have, a few times a month, there's a date night and you get a sitter, or 3 times a week, you get together and stay up late with your partner and watch a movie or trade massages or something like that, so that they know you're still there and you're still committed to them. And then they will be more available to you when it comes time to saying, hey, I need help over here with baths or whatever those things are. So the second thing on your self-care checklist is getting your needs met. So what are your needs? And I think this is something a lot of mothers struggle with, because when we become a parent, it's really easy to just always put the needs of others first, especially our little ones. And we start to, if we haven't been good from the very beginning about knowing our own needs, which can certainly be the case, well, it only gets harder, when you're constantly having to look out for a little one. And, you might not even know how badly you need a shower, or how hungry you are, or how, if you just had a little bit of time outside, then you could come back refreshed. So, in any given moment, if you're starting to feel overwhelmed, depressed, whatever the emotion is just take a moment, if you can, take a deep breath, even just step away and just say, okay, what am I needing right now? Like, what do I need, and why do I need that? Okay, I need some time outside. Well, why do I need time outside? Well, because when I'm outside, I remember who I am. I remember my place in this large scheme of things. I remember my connection to the divine. When I'm outside, my mind gets quiet, right? So now that I know why I need this, it's going to be easier for me to then make sure that I do get this. And this is, again, where you can say to your partner or a caretaker, someone who's maybe partnering and helping you, to say, I really need this. And you don't have to tell them why unless you want to, but you can just say, I'm really needing this. Could you support me in this? And also for yourself, for a lot of mothers, we feel really guilty if we take time away and do something for ourselves. Well, then that's not time I'm with my child and they need me. But assessing in that same moment, well, what is the benefit to the whole unit, to your partner, and what is the benefit to your role as a parent if you were to get this need met? So if I were to get outside today for 15 minutes, I would be more patient. I would have better perspective on things and what's actually really important and what's not. I'll be more present for my partner to listen to their needs, right? So if you can go through those steps, it can be really helpful. And then it becomes clearer to you what you need, why you need it, how it's going to benefit you. And then you can start to put into place getting that need met, actually doing it. Now, if you cannot find your way there, or if that is really challenging, the next 2 on my checklist are going to be absolutely critical. And these are my herbal recommendations. Now, these herbal recommendations are also going to be helpful, even if you can go through for yourself and assess your own needs. But maybe you're still feeling depleted and you're still feeling like those things are not actually nourishing you on the level that you really need to be nourished. So my checklist item number 3 is adaptogens. Now, adaptogens are a class of herbs that modulate the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, or the HPA axis, or a fancy way of saying your stress response. So your stress response is this biological system built in that helps you respond to a stressful situation appropriately. So when we were, cave men and women and people, then, if a tiger was chasing us, it would be appropriate to scream, to run, to send blood to your legs and to get out of there. But these days we're not being chased by tigers or bears. We really were being bombarded by social media and just overwhelmed with life. We have COVID going on right now, but there's just so many things in our environment now that can trigger those stress responses, like even traffic can really trigger that fight or flight response in us. So what an adaptogen does is it helps to buffer the extremes so that when you're faced with a stressful situation, you have almost just a few seconds of a gap to where your body says, oh, is this really a threat? Is this really an emergency? Okay, I can see this a little more clearly, and then you can recover from it more quickly. So rather than, having someone slam on the brakes in front of you and you grab the wheel, your heart's racing, you start to sweat, and being in that state for 20 minutes until you get to your destination, you can maybe come back from that, bounce back from that, maybe within 5 seconds, 10 seconds, maybe in a minute, you're totally back to normal. And so adaptogens are really good at that. And as mothers, there's constant threats. And even if they're not real threats, in our minds, we worry. So there's constant activation of our adrenals. And so having adaptogens as part of our daily self-care program can be really helpful in buffering and keeping us from getting overwhelmed, burnt out, or even on the opposite side, depressed. So what are adaptogens, or what are some examples? Well, the ones that I really like for mothers are ones that are going to be safe during both pregnancy and in breastfeeding. So I'm going to give you those 4, and then 4, that's 3. This is 4. I've been practicing doing 3 with my daughter. So 4. And then I'll give you some other examples that are also wonderful that you can take you can add into this list if you are nursing. So my top 4 would be shatavari is number 1. Shatavari is, the Latin name is Asparagus racemosus. This comes from the Ayurvedic tradition. It's a root that's used, and it's really, really wonderful for building up deep resilience. And it's also a libido tonic. So it can really help when we're depleted and we're feeling prickly or unavailable emotionally to our partners or to our kids. It just creates a lot of softness. And the Ayurvedic one of the translations for this herb is she who possesses 100 husbands. So you can just imagine the type of fortitude and resilience and patience and energy and vitality a woman must have if she were to have 100 husbands, or we could put in partners there too. So that's the idea, though, that this herb really rejuvenates. And it was used traditionally in Ayurveda during pregnancy and also during breastfeeding. We don't have a lot of scientific clinical trial or research on this. So you will find some books that say do not take because of not enough facts available. So you can leave that up. All of these herbs, of course, you do your own research. But I have used them in my own body and in clients' bodies and have found them to be very helpful. The second one is also an Ayurvedic herb. It's called ashwagandha. The Latin name is Withania somnifera. And this is also a root that we use. And this one translates as he who has the virility of a horse. So again, think about just the amount of nourishment that has to be within a person to be have as much virility as a horse has, to have stamina and endurance and all of that power and will and ability to kind of get up and go. The interesting thing about this herb too, though, is that it's also a gentle nervine. So as well as boosting the system, it also has this capacity to relax the mind and relax the nervous system. So that's a really nice combination. And often in Ayurveda, shatavari and ashwagandha are blended together in formulas. So you might find a formula out there that has half, one part of each. You could also buy these 2 tinctures and then take them together. And those work really nicely. You can take them twice a day in the morning, 5 milliliters. I would take, if you're doing both of them, I would take 2.5 milliliters of each in the morning and 2.5 milliliters each in the evening. Or if you're taking one, it would be 5 milliliters in the morning and 5 milliliters at night. A milliliter is about a teaspoon. So that ends up being about 3 droppers full or so, depending on your dropper size. The other herbs that are really safe in pregnancy and in lactation are reishi and cordyceps. These are mushrooms and they have a long history of use. Reishi is a brightener of the spirit. It really brightens up the heart. So if depression is something that you struggle with, this can be a really great herb to lift up your spirits. It's also has that adaptogenic quality in it. The Latin name is Ganoderma, and there's actually a lot of different species. Lucindum is one of the main varieties, but there's also what is it? Americanum. There's a reishi, or maybe I know it grows here in the Midwest, but there's other varieties that you might be able to find where you live. And reishi works really nicely as a powder. You can add it to smoothies. You can add it to cacao powder or like hot cocoa, or even your coffee. If you drink coffee, which I would say is not a good idea if you're trying to replenish yourself. So you can use it as a coffee substitute, perhaps. And then also the other mushroom, cordyceps, is wonderful as well. It's really nice for cognition and brightening the mind and helping the mind think through things, and can be helpful with memory. So that could be one you could use as a powder as well. And both reishi and cordyceps can be taken as tinctures. So if you prefer tinctures, you could dose it the same as the ashwagandha and the shatavari. So adaptogens, that would be my number 3 on the checklist. And then number 4 are nervines. Nervines are herbs that gently relax. I'm talking here about nervine relaxants, because there are nervine stimulants, which we are not going to need, right? Not if we're trying to tune into what we need and calm our whole nervous systems down. So these nervous system relaxants can be really nice to take on a daily basis, as well as the adaptogens. These both need to be taken daily to really see any results. And I really like to take nervines in either a tea form or as a tincture. And I'll show you some examples of what I use. Let's see here. So one of the other reasons why nervines, I think, are so important for mothers is that they can help with sleep. And most mothers, unless your child is one of those magical children who just slept on their own through the night from day one and never had any problems, and you slept trained them and they just were, it was easy, then maybe your sleep has not been disrupted. But I think for a majority of mothers, their sleep gets very disrupted through all of the different phases of raising children. And even up into, even my 5-year-old, she sleeps on her own, but sometimes she'll wake up in the middle of the night, or my 3-year-old wakes up and then wakes up yet. So, there can be a lot of reasons. Also, just, I think if we're not processing a lot and resting our mind during the day, then that can also spin us out at night. So what I like to take for myself for nervines and that sort of nervous system relaxant are these 2 products. This one is by a company called Wild. It's a CBD gummy. This one has elderberry in it, and it's CBD and CBN. CBN is it's a cannabinoid, which is really helpful for helping with sleep. So I take 1 to 2 gummies before bed, about 30 minutes before bed. And I can just feel that really, there's a lot of research that shows that that CBD is just super helpful with sleep. And there are small amounts that do come through in breast milk. So you do want to be mindful of your dosage. So if you are breastfeeding a lot, especially if you're doing a lot of night nursing, you may want to take half a dose, like half of a gummy, or, find this product does not have any THC in it. So that's something that you really want to look for too. You want to do a broad spectrum and not full spectrum, because the THC will go through the breast milk, but the CBD doesn't really as much, and it's certainly not going to have the same psychotropic effects on the baby. But, hey, maybe the baby will sleep a little better too. So that's one thing. The other nervine blend that I really love is this one by a company called Anima Mundi. And this is called the Dream. It's their Dream Blend, and it tastes delicious. This is Anima Mundi Apothecary Botanical Dream Lucid Dreaming Elixir, Sleep Aid and Dream Tonic. Now, I can't say that it has really helped my dreams, although I've always been a pretty good dreamer, but I have found that this really does help me fall asleep and stay asleep. So both of those, definitely I've noticed a difference when I take this. And this one has ashwagandha, kava kava, passion flower, ginger, skullcap, blue lotus, rose petals, and cardamom pods. And it's in a liquid extract with cane spirits. It has a little bit of rose geranium essential oil and vegetable glycerin. Now, this one does have kava in it and skullcap, which would not be recommended during nursing. Again, only really because there's not a lot of research done. So I would recommend this would be a particularly good tonic if you are maybe only just an older child, maybe a child over 1.5, a child that's already eating solid food, so they're not getting all of their primary nutrition from breast milk, that you could add this in. And really, to me as a mother, this is my own personal opinion, is that if I'm going to get better sleep and the risk of my child having any terrible effect is pretty low, then overall it's worth the risk for me, because I know if I get good sleep, I'm going to be a much better parent and a much better partner. So, I know these herbs, I've taken them for years. I've given them to clients for years. They are safe, especially in these relatively low doses, and they are effective. So I take about, the dose is 1 teaspoon. I take a tablespoon. So I take 3 times the recommended dose, and it's effective, and it really, really helps and really works. Now, if you are breastfeeding or you're a little more cautious, you may want to try something more gentle like chamomile, which has been used for centuries for breastfeeding women and even in babies. So you can brew yourself a cup of chamomile tea, maybe every morning and every evening, to keep your nervous system in a relaxed state, especially for sleep. You can have a cup, I would say, an hour before bed. That way you're not getting up in the night to go to the bathroom. Now, if you are a mother that tends to run damp, that means your body tends to hold fluids, and maybe your skin is a little damp. Maybe you are just sort of postpartum bloated a little bit, which can be very common. Then you might want to add a little bit of something that's going to be a little astringent, like rose petals is a really nice nervine, and they taste very nice together with a little bit of honey. If you tend to run dry, if your body's more dried out and you're more on that side, you can add a little bit of marshmallow root. And I would add maybe about a teaspoon of marshmallow root and 2 teaspoons of chamomile flowers to about 2 cups of water. And with the rose petals, I would just do maybe half a teaspoon. You don't need much. It's stronger than the marshmallow root. And then 2 teaspoons of your dried chamomile flowers if you're damp, right? So that would be my recommendation. And then my last one on the checklist is your overnight infusion. This is basically your multivitamin, and moms, you need it, because if you're breastfeeding, a lot of your minerals are going to your baby, which is great. So you have to make sure that not only is your baby getting the minerals it needs, but that you are getting the minerals you need as well. Nettles is also very, very tonifying for the body. It's very building. It's slightly warming. So it gives the body this really good vital force. This is some nettles that I brewed last night for myself. You can see this dark, rich color. I did add in mine, I like to add a little bit of licorice root, which is an adaptogen. So I usually do maybe about a pinch or 2 pinches of licorice. It makes it quite sweet, which I like too. And then I might throw in another herb that is speaking to me. So maybe on one day I'll throw in some chamomile to my overnight infusion. Other days I'll add some blue vervain, which is bitter and a great stress tonic too. And your overnight infusion, you can just think of it as your wellness drink for the day. And so what I do, I have videos on this if you look back through my channel of how to make an overnight infusion. But essentially, you just would take about half to 3/4 of a cup of dried nettles, add it to this quart glass jar, pour hot water over it, and cap it and let it sit for about 8 hours. So I like to do mine either at night before I go to bed or first thing when I wake up in the morning. And then I wait 6 to 8 hours, strain it, usually into one of my cups, like this one here, the straw. If you have a straw, for some reason, it helps you to drink more fluids. So I'll just pour it into there, and then I'll drink that throughout the day. And again, it's high in iron, which is really helpful, especially postpartum. So if you just had a baby, nettles is safe. It'll help you build up your iron reserves because we often lose blood during childbirth. And also just making children requires, a lot of our blood goes and our iron goes to the baby. So even if you're pregnant, nettles is a wonderful tonic drink you can take. And it also has calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, molybdenum, potassium, basically everything we need, and chlorophyll, which is the life-giving gift of the plants. It's only one carbon off from our own hemoglobin or our own blood. So chlorophyll is essentially plant blood, which I think is kind of dark, but we're getting to Halloween time. So, but it's like rich like that. It's like the essential juices of the plant. And that's really good for our bodies and our skin. Nettles is really great for your skin. It's great, gentle detoxifier, lymphatic mover. So it's going to benefit, I think, most women. Now, if you do find that you run dry and you find it too drying, do the pinch, like I said, of a little bit of licorice, or you can do some marshmallow root, and that will also make it a little bit more moistening and a little bit less drying. The only time you would not want to use licorice is if you have high blood pressure, because it will elevate your blood pressure. And it takes a lot to do that, or like a moderate dose. But if that's something that you're worried about, then I would just forego it and use your marshmallow root instead. So yeah, it's a easy to make routine. It will help with your self-care. Every time you do something for yourself, it's like, putting a drop into like a big savings account. And we really, as mothers, need to be nourished. We need to be full. We need to feel like things are manageable. And so if we can just take a few of these ideas and try to put them into practice, you might find that motherhood becomes a little bit more enjoyable and delightful and fun, and actually gives you energy back, and you become more brightened by the process of mothering. And so that is, I think, what we want our children to see. That's what we want to model for them. And it's also, I think, what we deeply want for ourselves as well. So I hope that was helpful. And take good care of yourselves, and let me know if there's any other tips. What would you add to your checklist? What are some of the essentials that you need to stay feeling at your best? And if there's any other topics you'd like me to chat on, please put those in the comment section. Give it a thumbs up if you liked this video, if you found it helpful, and share it to any platforms where you think other people may benefit from hearing it. So thank you all so much for subscribing to my channel, for listening, and I'll be back more next week with more tips on motherhood. And I think I might do some pregnancy herbs or more mothering tips. Not sure yet. We'll see what the cosmos speak. All right. Bye, everyone.